Hey Zoology, this is Unit 1, Animal Basics. We're at the end of Section 2 in Parts 4 and 5. So as a reminder, we started our first video with organismal complexity and symmetry and cephalization. We then in class today did cleavage and early development, and then gastrulation and gut formation. So how the gut forms as a result of the blastula turning in on itself through gastrulation. Today we're going to talk about dermal tissues and coelom development, and then the final characteristics used to organize kingdom Animalia, which is segmentation. So the blastula starts turning in on itself through gastrulation, and so that blastopore forms. That's the hole at the bottom, and it creates this interior called the blastocele. So the interior and the exterior layers of the gastrula around the gut start to get closer together. So in the picture I have up here on the board, which is hard to see, but you can probably whatever. So the idea there being that you create this thing where the bottom part starts to fold in, and then it starts to squeeze against the inside walls of the container. So the layering gives rise to three dermal layers. Derm meaning skin. So these are three quote-unquote skin layers, okay? You have the ectoderm, that is the outside of the gastrula that's facing the environment, so the outside of the organism, essentially. You have the endoderm, which is the inside that faces into the gut. So we have our exterior, we have our interior, which is just along the line of the gut, and then the mesoderm sometimes can form in more advanced animals. It's a third layer of dermal tissue that develops inside the blastocele, and it can become the more advanced internal organs of the animal. So this is what we're talking about. So down here at the bottom, we had the blastopore forming, and so that created the blastocele inside of the blastula. So now it's called the gastrula because it gastrulated. The outside of it is the ectoderm. That part that folded inside and is going to become the lining of the gut is the endoderm, and then in some organisms a third layer called the mesoderm forms. So the ectoderm is the epidermis of the organism, the outside of the organism. It also develops often into the nervous system. The endoderm down here at the bottom is the lining of the digestive tract and respiratory tract. So basically, any of those linings that are going to be coming directly in contact with the outside world, the urinary or the excretory tract, the digestive tract, and the respiratory tract. The mesoderm forms in more advanced animals because a lot of animals just need to survive, eat, and use the bathroom, and that's it. And those animals only need an ectoderm and an endoderm. But those other animals like us that are more advanced, we develop that third layer, the mesoderm, and that develops into all of our internal systems, our skeleton, muscular system, the inside of our skin, our circulatory system, reproductive system, etc. It becomes more, it makes our digestive system more advanced. So we create organs as a part of our digestive system. So we're not just a tube, we're a tube with things attached to the tube. Some animals only develop two layers, and those animals are called diploblastic, so di meaning two. And those animals like us that form three are called triploblastic, tri meaning three. So diploblastic organisms only have an endoderm and an endoderm and ectoderm. They have no internal organs. So you can look here at the jellyfish. It has its mouth and anus, gross. And as it develops, it creates the ectoderm, which develops into the into the skin of the organism. So the exterior skin, that's this purple part. And then we have the endoderm, which is the yellow lining around the inside of the gut. And the gut is this yellow interior. So that was the blastocele that as the organism develops further becomes the internal cavity or the gut. This also has a mesoglia. We're not talking about mesoglia. It's not a mesoderm, and it's not a mesoderm. It's just kind of some sort of like squishy stuff between the ecto and endoderm, so it's different. But you'll notice here, again, they only have two true germ layers or two true dermal layers. Triploblastic animals have a third layer called the mesoderm, and that creates another cavity inside the body. So if you think about us, we have the opening that goes from our mouth to our anus. And then between our digestive tract and the inside of our skin, we have a lot going on in there. That's all part of that mesoderm cavity. So that's part of that cavity that forms inside of our body. And when you create that mesoderm cavity, it's called a coelom. Now, some organisms create a mesoderm that doesn't open into a cavity. Those don't have a true coelom, but they are triploblastic, so we just call them acoelomates. A meaning without, coelom is what we call the mesoderm cavity. So while they have a mesoderm, they don't have that coelom cavity, so they're acoelomates. We have pseudocoelomates, which I'll talk about. Those are organisms that have that internal mesoderm cavity, but it is only the mesoderm is only around one side of it. The other side of that cavity is open to the gut, which is weird. Those are pseudocoelomates, pseudo meaning false. So they have a coelom, but it's not a true coelom. It's a false coelom. And then we have the eucoelomates, or the just coelomates, because they have a true coelom. They have a true internal body cavity created from that mesodermal tissue. So acoelomates, again, have mesodermal tissue, but it just fills the inside of their body cavity, and they do not have any sort of secondary opening. This yellow is the endoderm and then the gut down the middle of it. So they have this extra kind of this extra dermal layer, but it doesn't create an open cavity. Pseudocoelomates have an open cavity on the inside of their body, outside of their gut, but you'll notice that it only has mesoderm tissue on the outside of it. On the inside, all of that kind of liquid layer is open directly to the endoderm and to the gut. So they are called a tube within the tube, meaning there is some sort of cavity around the gut. Now, it's not a true cavity, it's not a true coelom, but it is a cavity around the gut. And then we have our more advanced final, that's us, the eucoelomates, those that have a true coelom. So they have the gut down the middle made out of the endoderm. And then there is the mesoderm that has created, you'll see on both sides here, true coeloms, true enclosed body cavities within the body of the organism. And that's most organisms like us. You'll see here that, we'll come back to this at a later date. I just want to throw it out there now. You'll see that cleavage is kind of the first decision on where organisms start to spread out. And then whether or not they become a deuterostome or protostome is the next one. Then we start getting into the actual dermal layers. So it's kind of the third layer in how organisms are kind of separated into their individual phyla. Another thing that we can talk about with animals that helps separate them into phyla, and this is really particularly for the worms, is segmentation. Some organisms are a little bit more advanced in that they have specific body units that are then copied over and over and over, and segmented worms fall into that a lot. We also see segmentation in arthropods, so in insects and arachnids and things like that. This picture is an example of a fireworm. By the way, they suck because all of these little things here, they are not feet down the side, these red things. These are bristles. They get stuck in your skin and they cause horrendous irritation, and there's poison in them, and it feels like your leg is on fire. I know this from experience because they're all over Hawaii. They suck. So we said these are the 5 big things that help separate organisms into their individual phyla. So then kind of what, in addition to our unifying characteristics before this, what really are kind of the big evolutionary trends? So we can map the evolution of animals by seeing that the first thing that developed that separated animals from all other organisms on the planet is that we're multicellular. We specifically all are multicellular. Then the more advanced animals, we have our radial animals and stuff like that. The more advanced animals are those animals that are bilaterally symmetrical. Then beyond that, within the bilaterally symmetrical organisms is the tube within a tube plan. So meaning there is some sort of coelom. And the most advanced organisms in terms of evolution that have evolved the most recently are the eucoelomates, or those organisms that have a true coelom. All right. Make sure that you bring any questions to our session on Friday, and then we'll review a lot on Monday, and I will talk to you then. Bye.